And I'm very excited to introduce our next two panelists, Avi Shua and Scott McCready. I'll do a quick introduction and then I'll pass it over to our moderator, Scott. To first and start with introducing Avi. Avi's the CEO and co-founder of Orca Security. He has over 25 years in the cybersecurity industry and was the CTO for Checkpoint and a crucial member of Unit 8200, the Israeli National Security Agency. Scott is the CEO of Soul Cyber Managed Security Services. Scott is an MSSP international expert with over 2 decades of experience in networking and in cybersecurity. He was instrumental in building global multi-path routes to market for well-known cybersecurity companies, including Dell, FireEye, and Symantec. So with that, I'll transition it over to Scott to lead us into our next panel.
Awesome. Thanks, Theo. So first of all, I'm going to take a risk here at my office. We actually have this amazing outdoor venue, and we're here in Dallas, and usually it's a little bit warm, but today it's like 72 degrees. So we're going to be risky and do a presentation from outside and see how it goes. So Avi, good to see you. Hope you're doing well.
Thanks for having me, and hope that we'll manage the risk that you are taking.
I appreciate it. Well, listen, I'm excited about this topic because most of us are technologists, right? Most of us have a background in technology. We work for technology companies. But when you start thinking about information security, especially right now, Theo came up with this concept of the bull run, for cybersecurity startups. So hopefully over the next 25 minutes or so, we'll be able to talk a little bit about the technology, but having come from bigger, larger companies like yourself at Checkpoint and others, myself, FireEye, Symantec, and then moving into the startup space. What does that mean for the people that are on the call here on the webinar? Is from both a technology standpoint, but also maybe from a business standpoint, or if they're thinking about getting into the cybersecurity startup space, what does that mean from an employee or from a founder? So that's sort of the goal. Avi, I know you've got a ton of background. I know Theo gave you a great introduction, but maybe take a minute or two, just do a quick sort of summary of your history and sort of what made you want to get into the startup space from Checkpoint and other places.
Sure. So thanks for asking, and I'll try to be not to take too much time on that. I'm, you can say, a cliche of cybersecurity founder. All I've done in my adult life, probably since the age of 13, is cybersecurity, being excited about that as a teenager, moving to the Israeli intelligence in Unit 8200 in the cyber offensive department of that. And from that, went to Checkpoint. I've been there for 11 years, did a few roles, and being chief technologist was the last one of them. And co-founded Orca together with additional 7 co-founders. We're all former Checkpoint executive and architects around 2.5 years ago. Since then, the company grew tremendously fast. We are currently more than 200 people, growing 800% year over year, valued in close to $2 billion valuation and serving hundreds of customers around the world. And for me, it's essentially was a next step from building cybersecurity solution at Checkpoint to building a new generation of cybersecurity solution in a new company. And I believe that many times there's tons of advantages for a big company. A big company can have a channel ecosystem, it have its go-to-market, it's the department that needs to support, they have the R&D, they have a lot of things that can help them, but usually they also have a lot of intellectual property and traditions that gets them to think in a certain way. So if, for example, you're an extremely successful endpoint company, or extremely successful network company, or extremely successful GRC company that built tons of intellectual property on a certain world, whether it's network, whether it's on-prem, whether it's IoT, it's usually very hard for a company to move to a different world. You're used to think of that world using the terms of the old one. And you're essentially using the hammer just because you see nails all around you. And although you have all of these capabilities, if you really want to start looking at the world in a different lens, then you probably want to start a new company.
That makes sense. So I know we have a variety of people on the phone. So some people may be individual contributors or managers. Some people may be thinking about being a founder. So maybe talk a little bit about your sort of thoughts, both as somebody who's founded a company as a CEO, but also someone who is hiring people to come into a startup. So if you're a employee, let's say, and you work for a larger company and you're thinking about moving to a startup, what do you think are sort of the ways they need to think about it? What are maybe the pros and cons to making that jump from a larger security company or technology company to a startup?
So I'll answer using a relatively generic answer that I'm asking any person, whether it's a candidate or a friend, that think about his next role. I think that many times people are focused on what's the title of the next role, what are my friends going to think of me, what the society is going to think of me. And they don't think about the most important thing, what are you going to do in the day-to-day, and whether it's something that is going to make you happy. And right. I think that when you are switching roles, don't think about the title, don't think about the way it's perceived. Think of what you're going to do in the day-to-day and whether it's something that you're really excited about and willing to devote your time for. And it doesn't matter if it's a big company or a small company. Now, naturally, I wouldn't recommend anyone to start a company simply because everyone is starting a company. There are some people says, I see so many people starting a cybersecurity company, I want to start one. As well, this is probably a recipe for disaster. If you want to start a company or to join in an early phase, I believe there's only one question that you need to ask. Why is this company solving the problem in a way which is order of magnitude better than the existing solution? And the reason I'm emphasizing order of magnitude is, as I mentioned, large companies have a lot of reasons to win. They have dedicated teams, they have better cash balance sheets, they know the customer, they have support. They have a lot of reasons for a customer to buy from a well-known, reputable company than a startup which is 2 months old or 6 months old. And in order to succeed, you need to give a real reason why your technology is so much better than the existing ones. Because if it's only incrementally better, if it's 20% better, if it's 50% better, then overall, it will make sense to use the older product. And this is the only question that you need to ask. If you manage to answer that you believe that this technology is order of magnitude better, not in terms of technology, but in terms of solving the actual business issues for the customer, then it's probably is going to be a success.
Yeah, I'll make two comments there because I think you hit on something really important. The first thing I'd say, as far as like when an employee is thinking about moving to a startup, I would say mindset really matters. I think doing what you love and enjoying your job is critically important. But it's almost impossible to get to a startup and have a well-defined job. So when you get to a startup, especially if you're the first 50 or first 100 employees, your job is almost always going to be multidimensional, right? You're not your product marketing, your product management and product marketing, your development, but your development plus product marketing, your sales plus your outbound. So there is rarely one job in a new startup. Most of the time when you join as an employee, you have to be very flexible, and where there's a problem, you just got to throw yourself into it and help solve that problem. And so if you're an individual that's looking for very well-defined roles and jobs, startups are going to be more challenging. If you're somebody who likes flexibility and has a broad skill stack, then that obviously works out well because you can come in and you like that flexibility. You can do your day job plus the other jobs that are going to be asked of you. So I think the mindset and what to expect is really important. Otherwise, people get a little frustrated sometimes because they're asked to do a lot of different things. And then the second point on orders of magnitude, more important, I think that's really, really important if you're thinking about being a founder, because the level of risk, the famous quote, "You never get fired for buying from IBM," right? The rumor is that IBM started that, by the way. I don't know if that's true, but that's the rumor. Is critical, right? And so if I'm buying something from a vendor and somebody large and well known, I don't have any risk to my board. I don't have any risk to anybody else because I can go buy this well-known company. So when it comes to something like product market fit, you said you have to solve the business problem. And this is massively critical because sometimes founders are so technically savvy, they forget that somebody has to actually spend the money. And so when people say, "Hey, I love your idea. That's a great idea. That's amazing," there's a very big difference, a very big gap between saying they think this is a cool idea and putting down $50,000 to go buy your thing. And so I think people sort of forget that at the end of the day, somebody has to cut a check for the technology, and that technology, what it delivers, how it delivers, and the business model, the pricing models, all go into why somebody would buy that. So I think you hit on some important things there. So the next thing I wanted to chat about was the proliferation of cybersecurity startups. So right now, I think plus or minus, there's about 3,500 security companies, information security companies around the world. There's a ton. And from what I could tell doing some research, there's hundreds that are founded every single year. Obviously, some make it, some don't. What do you think is sort of the, what do you think is, first of all, some of the keys to making, if you're new into the cybersecurity space, making your company stand out from the noise? And then the second question on that would be, if you're doing a good job of sort of cutting through the noise, how do you go about making sure that when people are looking for you and they're sort of evaluating 3,500 people, that what you're doing is very easy to understand, so that as a new company, you're not sort of caught up in the wash of all the other noise?
So it's a great question, and I think that there's definitely many startups, and there are many successful startups, many types of successful startups. I've seen companies that are very different from Orca, for example, that are successful in being very niche. For example, they know of a specific issue which is real for a small subset of the market and simply solve that niche. There's no solution for that. This is probably the easiest way to success. There's limited size to that, but this is probably one of them. For us, I can talk about our experience. What made us successful and essentially grow from 0 to close to 2 billion in less than 3 years is essentially that we saw a real problem and we found a dramatically better way to solve that. When I say dramatically, it's not only technology, but as you mentioned, business-wise. We are essentially answering the problem of what are my risks in my cloud environment. And I'm using this question very, very vaguely, not using the Gartner alphabet soup of CIEM, SPM, KSPM, CWPP, and a few other buzzwords that I've probably forgotten, because essentially what we figured out is that security practitioners want to see the risk in the cloud environment. They want to see all of them for all of the environment, and they want them to be prioritized based on the actual risk for the environment, based on the exposure, based on the business impact, etc. And this is something that you don't need me or an expert to say, that security practitioner would like to see all the risks for all of the environment and prioritized. I think a 16 years old can tell you that, but simply there's no solution that can do that. All solutions that existed require deployment of agent, required friction that cost enterprises millions of dollars, literally millions of dollars. If you, in order to understand the risk, you need to talk with 400 developers inside the organization, tell them, change your CI/CD processes, go to all projects, install agents, change the routing, make sure the data is going to a central location that is then transferred to the SIEM. These are projects that may work well within small environments, but within a large organization can take years, millions of dollars, and reach a very small coverage. We came with unique technology that solved it. Simply allowed full visibility over cloud environment without any agent installation, any side effect via read-only access. And this allowed the organization to solve two business needs. First, to get the security posture without tons of friction, and continuing to develop and innovate without delaying for security. And these are business needs that people understand that they can put a dollar amount for, and a lot of businesses care. Now, I think that any security founder, any cybersecurity startup need to answer, what business issue am I solving? And usually, and the answer can't be, there's a risk that you haven't solved, now buy my solution and it solves the risk, because I'm hearing it so many times. There's a risk in this environment, in this type of service. There's no solution that solves it. There's a lot of risks. Any security practitioner takes a lot of risk. You need to see that this is one of the risks that are high enough to actually put dollars. And dollars is not only the cost of the product, but the cost of implementation, utilizing, etc. on. And if you're able to demonstrate that, then you have a good way to success.
I mean, that makes sense. Obviously, when you guys came out, and it's been an amazing journey for you, in the 3 or 4 years, cloud security, and still to this day is one of the most fundamental topics that's discussed, right? So the problem is we were all used to a very perimeter-based life, right? The firewalls, some IDSs, some AV, and I used to call it the crunchy exterior with a soft, gooey middle. And obviously, as that sort of broken apart, the visibility and the understanding of security when it comes to cloud is not something that everybody understands, but they all sort of have an intrinsic worry about what's going on up there. So I guess, as you guys have success, it's going to bring other people into the space. Do you see like cloud security as the next major frontier for startups? And do you think that's going to turn into some level of consolidation in the space? Or do you think there's just going to be, some level of hyper specialization? So you've talked about like people finding a niche and solving that one risk versus some companies solving a broader risk. Which direction do you think that's going to go? And you're welcome to talk about cloud specifically or the broader security industry as a whole.
So I think that I see two conflicting trends that are pushing each to a different direction. On one end, a decade ago, most security was delivered via agents and network appliances. And their hyper-specialization comes with a huge, huge cost. You need to deploy 2 appliances. You need to configure, maintain, feed them with electricity, upgrade. So any specialized solution would come with an enormous cost, and this drove consolidation and reduction of vendors. Today, most of the solutions are delivered as SaaS, so it's easier to use multiple solutions. So this is one trend that pushes for more solutions. On the other end, what I'm seeing is the fact that there is a huge need for context, for tools that are going to provide a more holistic picture. People don't want a tool that will tell you, do you have vulnerability? A different tool that will tell you have an overly assigned privilege, a third tool that will tell you have 500 exposed services, and then to buy a 4th tool that will try to connect to the other 3 tools to tell you have a service which is exposed, vulnerable, and overly privileged. It simply doesn't work. So people want the platform to provide the context as a whole rather than specialized solution. And this is the way I see it. I think that when in many cases, there is a need for a platform that can answer a question, and then people are going to look for consolidation. In the cloud space, it's what's called CNAPP, the Cloud Native Application Protection Platform, which is a combination of many platforms, the CSPM, the KSPM, the CWPP, the CIEM, the container security. All of them are converging to the CNAPP space, which is like the NGFW of the cloud, as many capabilities converging to them. On the other hand, due to the fact that many of the solutions are delivered via SaaS, there is little value in combining tools and capabilities from different realms. There's not a lot of value of buying your endpoint solution from the same vendor that sells the cloud security solution or your multi-factor authentication from the network security. You can procure it. It's not like you're going to enjoy a lot in that area. So I think that these two conflicting trends will push, and we'll see the market evolving accordingly.
Yeah, it makes sense. You hit one of my favorite words, which I think information security has traditionally been, it's an area we all struggle, which is context. So it's very easy to take a point in time piece of data or piece of information and give that out to your customer or yourself. But this concept of context is incredibly important. It's a question that in my space, in the managed security services space, we get asked constantly. We get asked, how do I compare to my peers? How am I doing relative to last year? So this whole entire concept of saying, trying to put, and people talk about risk all the time. They're like, well, what is my risk? And what's my risk relative to a business problem or to a dollar amount? And what they're saying is, please contextualize what's happening in my environment so that I can understand it and try to turn that into a story and a narrative that I can tell to my board or to my CEO. And I think it's probably one of the biggest challenges in cyber is to say, how do I get these point in time pieces of information, and how do I turn that into business language that over time people can utilize to actually improve their security posture and lower their cybersecurity risk.
So if I can chime just something about that, I think that we are many times with security professional are not looking at risk in the correct way. Risk is not just a question of what is my most easy to pick lock, which is my most ICVSS vulnerability or open service, which most of the tool essentially giving you that list. And I saw too many cases that this is the data, and then we try to contextualize it using data. How many vulnerabilities do I have versus my peers? How many misconfiguration I have versus my peers, which is just trying to give a grade, but doesn't really look at the root issue. And the root issue, as I say it, is that risk is a combination of three things. It definitely includes how easy to pick the lock is, but it's also who have access to the lock and what's behind the lock. Now, if someone will come to your office and tell you that your worst security issue is that you found a cleaning supply closet with an easy to pick lock, you'd laugh at him because it's technically correct, but you need to be inside. And you need also, there's no value in picking it, you just get some cleaning supply. So I think that we need to move to talking about risk as a vectors, as a combination of issues that together are creating a real business risk. And frankly, there is probably 2 orders of magnitude less real risk that can be exploited versus discrete data points. Now, I believe that the move to the cloud essentially allows us to get risk that way because all of the data is in one place or can be in one place, versus an older on-prem world where the data is split between too many realms. In order to understand the risk, you need to see both the vulnerabilities, the syscon configuration, the switches configuration, the reverse proc configuration, and to make a map. Today, it's all in one place, at least in the cloud. And this supports a much more mature understanding of the actual risk and discussion about that.
Yeah, makes sense. I know we have a few minutes left here, so I want to pivot maybe a little more personal. So Avi, what is the best part and the worst part about being in a startup or founding a startup?
So the best part, I think that is to make a real impact. And when I'm speaking with customers that we are solving real problems to them, they told me, we've been plumbers. My team have been doing plumbing work for years, trying to have discussion with our developers, with DevOps, trying to make sure the tools work and we can shift the day and make them actual professionals that are able to handle risk rather than the plumbing of security tools. It makes me happy every day because we are actually solving the problems and for the customers and enabling them to work with their business and not against their business. No security professional wakes up happy in the morning trying to explain why the business needs to work differently. So the more we enable customer to work with the business, they are happier and we're happier. But of course, on the other side, it's a challenging job. There is not enough hours in a day to do everything that you want. And the bigger you grow, then also there's more things that are disconnected. There's more levels that are disconnected from you. And something that have been your own small project becomes monstrous in a way. And it's much harder to understand and to see. And this is the time, I think, every time that you manage and the amount of people that you manage go over a certain phase, there is a mental shift that is happening from being the one that understands almost any decision or everything to the level that you understand the people, the processes, and the higher level picture.
Yeah, I agree. We talk about being mission driven. I was talking to a friend yesterday about working in the security space. And I think we're lucky because, we wake up doing something every day that makes a difference. And so I think for me, the best part about, being in a startup, founding a startup, is just the excitement of being able to solve a problem when customers come to you and go, oh my goodness, this is exactly what we needed. This takes a big headache off my plate. This allows me to get on with my business of running my business and doing that in a very easy manner. That's super exciting. Obviously doing it with smart people. I mean, information security, I think right now in the US has about 500,000 open job openings from a technical, not even sales or marketing. And so the people that are in the space tend to be very smart, very clever, my CTO, David Emerson, was on the previous call. I mean, the chance to work with people that care, that want to make a difference, and that have very clever ways of going about solving problems is thoroughly enjoyable to me. What's the classic? I try to hire people smarter than me and then get out of their way. And then obviously the excitement of building something. For me, it's always more fun to build something than to manage something. So I think when it comes to startups, all those aspects are really exciting. Obviously, it's the same problems on the cons. Is you've got to growth. You got to manage your growth. You've got to find the time to work with your teams. You got to get a bunch of other stuff around the business set up when it comes to making sure your people are treated well and set up for success and all those things. So you just have to find the time somewhere in the cracks to get it all done. But it's sort of everyone sort of knows you got to do that. So it's kind of hard to complain too much about it. We got 5 minutes here. Anything top of mind for you as we sort of wrap up here for the people on the phone when they're thinking about cybersecurity startups, either joining them or starting them? Anything else that's top of mind for you that you want to sort of wrap up with?
I'd love to talk about, to share something when we look at the world and zooming out. I believe that for the average person, a dramatically higher percentage of his life became digital over the last 2 and 3 years. I'm looking at my friends and families, whether it's doctors that used to do only face-to-face and now everything is telemedicine, or or lawyers that just used to work from the office and now many of them working from home, or people that just realized that they can buy a lot of things that they actually went to stores. So I'm not sure if the growth was 100%, 200% or 300%, but it's definitely in the order of magnitude of hundreds of percents that the digital world have become a dominant part of everyone's life. I know it's almost absurd to say it because we take it for granted, but this accelerated dramatically. And at the same time, the risks of that accelerated. So this is essentially, I believe, the root reason for that growth in the cybersecurity space. A huge part of our life became digital and need protection. And there is a major difference between protecting physical space and cyberspace. If someone tries to rob the bank and fails, he's usually going to jail. He's going to be caught and not going to do it again. If someone tries to rob the bank virtually, in 99.99% of the cases, and I probably can add a few more nines, he can do it again and again and again and again, and maybe he'll succeed sometime. And this is a very different world that we need to protect. And I really believe that the world economy is dependent on that, because people rely that they can work securely, that they can buy stuff, that they can consult with a healthcare provider without the data leaking. And people trust that to happen. And it's the cybersecurity industry responsibility to make it a reality. And it's definitely something which cannot be taken lightly.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Avi. I think somebody told me once when I was early in my career that commerce runs on trust. Like, we all sign all these contracts, but the real way business is done is you work with people and companies that you trust. And right now, we live in an asymmetric risk world because, as you said, people can do bad things in cyber and do them consistently and not really oftentimes face the repercussions. And so I think it's an incredibly exciting space. I spent almost my entire career in cyber. I know you have as well. I'm sure many of the people on the panel have, but there's a lot of challenges to be solved going forward. That's not going to change. We know you can see it coming. Obviously, you saw what happened with the pandemic. It's enabled more change when it comes to digital life, and the trust has to be enabled, and obviously that's our responsibility. I think you said that well. So, listen, I know we're 1 minute to the bottom of the hour here. Theo, I will hand it over to you. But from my side, Avi, thank you for taking the time. I know you're a busy man. Very much appreciate it. Theo, thanks for sponsoring it, and to everybody on the call, hopefully that was interesting and useful.
Thanks, Scott. It was great discussing you and looking forward to meeting in person someday.
Cheers. Same.
Thank you.